Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the cost-conscious riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. The costly coalition of Prime Minister Trudeau and sidekick Singh is not just profiting from our homegrown inflation, it's profiteering. Profiteering is making unfair or excessive profit. These extremist leaders are intentionally driving up the cost of everything, so its take of the taxes is even higher. They're doing this by giving more money printed on the quantitative easing press to banks, who in turn lend it to the public. The problem is there's a shortage of almost everything because fewer truckers can afford the fuel to deliver the goods. And with more money chasing fewer things, the prices go up. Like the bidding wars over family homes and apartments, like vehicles that should be on the vacant parking lots. You pay more for everything, and the government enjoys a windfall on the bonus taxes it collects as a reward for setting the economic conditions into place, like fuel shortages. So it drives up the price of everything to collect even more taxes. Then seniors are supposed to be grateful for the extra $19.50 a month. That's $5 extra a week to cover the 50% increase in gas at the pumps, heating bills, electricity bills, and groceries. A lot of people are fooled into thinking they're actually getting something for nothing. That's why the costly coalition does it. They know most people don't do the math, or they just don't know how to do the math. With the Church of Gaia holding its synod in the resort destination of Sharm el-Sheikh along the beach of the Red Sea in Egypt, we need to talk about net zero. You may as well know because you're paying for part of it. Advertised as COP27, it's the latest in a series of conferences spanning decades of integrating environmental concerns into the world order. These meetings are creatures of the United Nations. Since 1988, they've been producing reports. The reports represent the consensus of the world's scientists and experts and governments. These experts are dependent on government grants. The main objective of the conference is to increase funding obligations of the wealthier countries to poorer countries to the tune of at least $1.3 trillion a year from 2025 to 2030. China and Russia are, of course, exempt, so your diminished pay or pension checks will shoulder the difference. A senior vice president at the Royal Bank of Canada and Liberal government-funded advocacy groups are leading the charge against farmers. They cite Canada's agriculture and food production as being responsible for 10% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. That's 10% of the less than 2% of the world emissions attributed to Canada. They pontificate about new technologies and alternative management processes. There's no self-interest there. Farmers are having to borrow more millions for basic equipment at increasingly high rates of interest. When was the last time of any of those people from RBC or the advocates even speak to an average farmer, let alone visit a farm? They'd see how agriculture producers are geomapping their fields, so fertilizer is applied only when and where it's needed. The real incentive for bankers is in the carbon offsetting financial system. An offset is when Trudeau says he's paid a carbon offset to compensate for his jet's contrails when he flits out to Tofino for a day of surfing. Of course, it's taxpayers' dollars being used, so either way you pay. Stephen E. Koonin is a physicist and was an undersecretary for science in the Obama administration's Department of Energy, guiding government investments in energy technologies and climate science. He states, at best, the science driving all the climate initiatives in Canada, those are carbon taxes, refers to facts drawn directly from recently published research of the latest assessments of climate science published by the US government and the United Nations. Quote, humans have no detectable impact on hurricanes over the past century. Greenland's ice sheet isn't shrinking any more rapidly today than it was 80 years ago. The net economic impact of human-induced climate change will be minimal through at least the end of this century. End quote. He says the disconnect comes from the long game of telephone that starts with the research literature and runs through the assessment reports to the summaries of the assessment reports and on to the media coverage. So there are many opportunities to get things wrong, both accidentally and on purpose. It is important to continue striving to reduce emissions. It's also prudent to do so at the pace technology is developed so that human hardship is avoided. What net zero means to you is it's going to continue to be less affordable to live. One of the questions I'm asked most often is, what can we do about Justin Trudeau? Well, so long as the Liberal and NDP members can maintain their parliamentary coalition, Trudeau will continue to win votes of confidence. As the official opposition, our Conservative team will use the tools of Parliament to hold the Liberals accountable. So what does that really mean? When we asked Justin Trudeau who stayed in the $6,000 per night hotel, we're asking him to stand and account for that spending. It then falls to every Canadian to look at Trudeau's answer or lack of an answer. It falls to every Canadian to choose whether they'll support him at the next election. As a Conservative member, you, as a person, reading or watching a Conservative video or newsletter, together, we have a challenge. Our challenge is to get the word out to Canadians. Many Canadians are too busy working hard, raising children, caring for relatives, or volunteering at food banks to follow question period. That's why it's up to us to get the word out. Half the battle in a democracy is getting the word out to our fellow citizens about the actions of our government. The other half is telling Canadians how a Conservative government will be different. We don't know when the Socialist coalition in Parliament will break up, if ever, but our Conservative team will be ready for the next election. Our new leader, Pierre Poilievre, has already laid out 4 important priority policies: building housing, farming and feeding Canadians, cheaper and cleaner energy, more work with higher pay, instead of Liberal policies fueling inflation. A Conservative government will pass laws to lower the cost of eating, heating, and housing while increasing the amount of money you take home each week. Canada needs more housing. When the Bank of Canada built an asset bubble by printing money, Canada was in a housing shortage even before the pandemic. Canada does not have a land shortage. We have a building shortage. A big reason for that shortage is the cost to build a home. Municipal development charges, environmental assessments, and a telephone cable duopoly, they all contribute to the cost of building homes. Under a Conservative government, federal infrastructure dollars for large municipalities will be tied to the number of new homes being built. The Conservative government will also sell off 15% of the 37,000 underused federal buildings and turn them into housing. As Pierre recently said, quote, "It just warms my heart to think of the wonderful family rolling up in their U-Haul to move their belongings into their beautiful new home in the former headquarters of the CBC." End quote. Food prices have increased dramatically because the cost of growing food is rising. Each time the Liberals increase the carbon tax, the cost to run the large farm equipment goes up, The cost to dry and store the grains goes up, and the cost to transport food from the farm to the store goes up. Under a Conservative government, we'll eliminate the carbon tax. In addition to the Liberal policy of increasing energy prices, the Liberals have placed retroactive tariffs on fertilizer. Under a Conservative government, we'll eliminate tariffs on all fertilizer. Along with making fertilizer more expensive through tariffs and taxes, the Liberals are pushing for regulations to cut nitrogen emissions by 30% by 2030. Every expert agrees that a 30% cut in emissions by 2030 is not possible without reducing crop yields. Lower crop yields mean less food, and less food leads to higher prices. Under a Conservative government, we'll help the farmers increase their yields, lower prices, and feed more people. The goal of Liberal energy policies is to increase the price of energy. It's bad for our economy and bad for the environment. Under a Conservative government, we'll replace anti-energy legislation with pro-development laws. The Liberals' ideologically driven regulations were intended to choke off the oil and gas industry, but they're hurting every energy project, especially hydro and nuclear. Canada has abundant sources of hydroelectricity, but under Justin Trudeau, nothing's being built anymore. Europe is begging us to produce more liquefied natural gas, but they're buying it from the United States. The United States liquefies natural gas in the Gulf of Mexico, then exports it to Europe and Asia. Canada's coasts are closer to Europe and Asia than the Gulf of Mexico, so buying Canadian would be cheaper and provide fewer emissions from the transportation. In order to make liquefied natural gas, it must be cooled, and Canada's cooler than the Gulf of Mexico. So much so, it's 25% cheaper to cool natural gas in northern BC or Newfoundland than it is in Louisiana. Building more dams and getting liquefied natural gas to the coast will reduce global emissions, but it's not enough. We need nuclear power. Unfortunately, our radical Minister of the Environment opposes nuclear energy. He'd rather cover the countryside in solar panels and windmills. Under a Conservative government, we'll support new nuclear research and development. Communities such as Deep River and Chalk River can only benefit from investing in nuclear research, provided they can find the skilled workers. Under the Liberals, our ability to attract new talent has ground to a halt. With an aging population, we need to attract skilled workers and ensure they're putting their skills to use. Our communities are struggling for doctors, while trained physicians work as Uber drivers in Toronto. Under a Conservative government, we'll establish national testing standards for foreign credentials and ensure credential recognition happens within 60 days and allow people to work on credential recognition before even arriving here. While it's important to attract more people to work in Canada, we must also make extra work worthwhile. In Canada, we often penalize those who want to work more. A recent example was the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, commonly known as CERB. Canadians who found themselves out of work during the first year of the pandemic could apply for and receive $500 a week. If you found your hours cut back, you could still apply for CERB so long as you made less than $1,000 a month. This meant a worker could bring home $3,000 per month before taxes. The problem is, if a worker earns one extra dollar, they lost all of the CERB. While CERB has since been eliminated, these types of anti-work incentives are still common. A single mother with 2 children earning $55,000 a year would lose 80% of every extra dollar she earned. Nobody should ever be punished for working harder. Under a Conservative government, we'll reform and lower taxes to ensure every Canadian who wants to work will be rewarded for the extra effort. Until the next election, our Conservative team in Ottawa will be continuing to asking the hard questions. Canadians concerned about Trudeau's big tax, borrow, and spend agenda need to tell their friends and their neighbors about what's happening. What's happening to our country's future? Your future. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant, wishing you a good night.